ES put in a 2% rally day on Friday. Does that mean the bottom is in, or can this bounce still be sold? This is how I'll be trading this week. Last week saw another big rally on Sunday night and Monday, but ultimately this rejected that 7,007 to 7,018 zone, and really this just made a lower high after the failed breakout of all-time highs that we saw from the prior week. And really this week was just continuation of the corrective action and a downtrend from that failed breakout of all-time highs for the majority of the week, with all bounces being sold and then making new weekly lows. So you can see, we get this sell-off on Tuesday after failing to clear the 7,007 to 7,018 zone, and really just gave back the entire rally from Sunday night. We get this initial kind of relief bounce, and that gets sold back into 69.48, and then a weaker relief bounce there Wednesday that gets sold again, and then finally saw some acceleration and a speed up of the sell-off once the 68.64 to 68.87 area failed, and especially when it was rejected on the back test here. Finally saw a little bit more acceleration into the lows here and some short-term capitulation on Thursday night. So now coming into this Thursday night sell-off, we've been selling for 3 days. All bounces have been sold. No real major relief rally yet, and we finally get some of that speed up into the lows, into this really big swing low back from January here. You can see at 67.72. So major swing low, the end of that kind of correction to start the year, where we sold 200 points into it, then rallied 200 points out of it. So really big weekly monthly swing low. And so we got that kind of capitulation, short-term capitulation on Thursday night right into that low, and end up putting in a failed breakdown. So some longs finally kind of puke into the lows, late shorts trapped underneath the swing low. And so the recovery of that, you reclaim a swing low like that, and especially reclaim 68.18 to 20, and you start getting some real progressive short covering rally, and the first real major relief rally since this downtrend started on Tuesday. So now as you start to reclaim some of these prior failure points from earlier in the week, you start to get progressive short covering higher and higher. So we reclaim 68.18 to 20, and that sees continuation, more progressive short covering back into 68.64. We base underneath that and clear it on the Friday open, and then that starts another short covering leg that takes us all the way back into 69.48 to 69.70, back into the kind of middle of this range into the Friday close. The majority of the week really was sell the bounce. So there was some decent two-way trading where there were some short opportunities on bounces into back tests. There were some nice long opportunities primarily against this 68.87 and 68.64 areas, and some failed breakdowns of overnight lows and prior day lows for those long rotations back up into back tests of failure points, and there were also short opportunities on those back tests, 69.48, the back test of 69.32 here, and then especially the back test of 68.64. Once this failed, this had kind of been your main support shelf most of the week. Now 68.64 fails all the way down into 6,800, 60 point sell, then a 60 point rally directly back into it. That gets rejected. So nice short opportunity on the back test of 68.64, which was the back test of the Wednesday low. And then that rejection is what took us down into that new weekly lows and that kind of short term, sell off there into Thursday night. Now, what does this mean for next week? Does this rally on Friday mean that the bottom is in and new all-time highs are on the way? For me, this is a nice short-term low, but personally, I would say to keep an open mind. So, so far this is a short covering rally, and it's completely possible for sellers to reload higher up, especially into the 7,007 area, and put in another lower high that eventually works back down and makes new lows. Now, we also know that sellers have consistently fumbled opportunities like this, so it would not be surprising for them to fail to defend where they need to and eventually get lifted above 7,007, and we do get new all-time highs and probably much higher if that were to happen. We do need to remember that this is a nice relief rally, but it was primarily driven by short covering, which means that if and when it retraces, buyers do have to step in with actual initiative buying on back tests, or we can just retrace this rally right back down. So really this week will be determined by whether sellers defend 7,007 and get continuation down, or if buyers are able to defend on back tests and retraces of the Friday rally. And keep in mind that if this is the start of a larger correction off of all-time highs, that would eventually target more of an 8 to 10% corrective move. A rally like this being sold higher up and eventually making new lows is not unusual at all. Last week established a large range from the prior week, and the key pivots for this week will be 7,007, this failure point from Tuesday that started that long liquidation, which is now a heavy supply, and then 68.87, which is the top of this kind of demand zone that we held initially this week, which is also kind of the mid pivot of last week's range, and then 68.18 to 20, which is here the support shelf that we have held multiple times, and really the reclaim of this that really kickstarted that relief rally on Thursday night. So based on those pivots, sellers' objective next week would be to defend 7,007, work back down into 68.87, and really see failure of this area 68.87 in order to see 68.20 again. If the failure of 68.20 likely sees new weekly lows, and then we can see if we get continuation from there. On the other hand, buyers' objective this week would be to defend the poor structure in the short covering rally on Friday on back tests and actually step in and firm up a bid there into 68.87 and 68.20 if we see that, for them to defend those areas, and then eventually they will have to reclaim this failure point at 7,007. That's where sellers would really be offside. That would break the downtrend, and that would likely lead to a downtrend breakout that would target new all-time highs, well into 7,100 plus likely. As far as the top weekly trade setups for next week, on the long side, I would watch for buyers to defend on back test of 68.87. See if buyers step in there and defend that area for a bounce back into 69.32. On a larger retracement, what I would be watching is if buyers can defend the 68.64 spike area, especially if we were to sweep the spike low at 68.45 and reclaim 68.64. That's a weekly trade setup which could see a nice rotation all the way back into 69.32 and potentially higher. On the short side, the top short setup this week is looking for a rejection of 7,007. This failure point from Tuesday, we haven't back tested this. This is going to be heavy supply, and especially if we see fairly direct continuation early in the week with little retracement of this. If we continue to see that quickly into 7,007, I would definitely watch for shorts on rejection of that, or any failed spikes above 7,007 in order to be positioned for that rotation and retracement back into 69.70 and 69.48. You could also, earlier in the week, if we start to retrace sooner, you could look to be short on the failure of 69.32, which may trigger that first retracement of this vertical rally and this poor structure down into 68.87 and 68.64. That's what I'll be watching for on ES this week. If you'd like to trade live with real pros every day, join us at Trade with Insight.